Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel Pause Verve. If this story touches your heart, please like the video and share it with others. Your support helps us continue bringing you more heartwarming stories. The Willow Creek animal shelter smelled of antiseptic and anxious anticipation, its concrete walls echoing with the restless barks of dogs vying for attention. It was a place where tails wagged with desperate optimism, where every visitor's step sparked a flicker of hope in canine eyes, except in one kennel, tucked at the far end of the row, where hope seemed to have long since faded. There, behind, a rusted chain-link gate lay Rusty, a border collie whose black and white coat was patchy and thin, his ribs stark against his skin. His left hind leg, bent at an awkward angle, trembled when he shifted, and his breath came in shallow, uneven rasps. The shelter staff had named him Rusty for the reddish tint of his fur, where it wasn't missing, but few bothered to call him anything at all. A faded sign on his kennel read, "Special Needs Medical," a warning that sent most visitors hurrying past, their eyes averted from the dog who seemed to have given up. The shelter was overcrowded, its budget stretched thin, and Rusty's time was running out. The staff whispered about it in hushed tones during their breaks, their voices heavy with regret. "He's got maybe a week," said Maggie, the head volunteer, checking her clipboard with a sigh. "No one's going to take a dog that sick, not with those vet bills." The word euthanasia hung unspoken in the air, a cold reality that loomed closer with each passing day. Rusty, as if sensing his fate, barely lifted his head when the shelter's front bell chimed, signaling new arrivals. His cloudy amber eyes stared at the wall, resigned, as if he'd learned long ago that no one would stop for him. Yet today, something was different. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, as Laura Bennett and her 5-year-old son Noah stepped through the shelter's glass doors. Laura, with her worn denim jacket and tired hazel eyes, clutched Noah's small hand tightly, her heart thudding with a mix of purpose and trepidation. They were here for a community outreach program, a chance for Noah to learn about kindness by helping walk the shelter's puppies. Laura had no intention of adopting. Her life was already a tightrope walk of bills, grief, and single motherhood. 2 years ago, her husband Tom had succumbed to cancer, leaving her to raise Noah alone. Noah, with his father's curly brown hair and a quietness that worried his teachers, had retreated into himself since the loss, his words few and his smiles rare. Laura hoped today might spark a little joy in him, a fleeting distraction from the weight they both carried. The shelter buzzed with activity as volunteers ushered families toward the brighter kennels, where fluffy puppies tumbled over each other, their yips drowning out the quieter residents. "Over here, folks," called a volunteer named Sam, gesturing toward a pen of squirming Labrador mixes. "These little guys are ready for homes." Laura started to follow, guiding Noah along, but the boy stopped abruptly, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. His wide blue eyes, so like Tom's, fixed on the far end of the shelter, where Rusty's kennel stood in shadow. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the din. "That one." Laura followed his gaze, her stomach twisting as she saw the dilapidated kennel and the frail dog inside. "Oh, Noah, let's look at the puppies first," she said, gently tugging his hand. But Noah's feet stayed planted, his small body rigid with a determination she hadn't seen in months. He pointed at Rusty, his finger trembling slightly. "He's alone," Noah said, his voice cracking with an emotion that seemed too big for his tiny frame. Laura knelt beside him, her heart aching at the intensity in his eyes. She wanted to pull him away, to shield him from the pain of caring for something so broken, but something in Noah's expression stopped her, a spark of connection, fragile yet fierce, that she couldn't ignore. Maggie approached, her clipboard tucked under her arm, her expression a mix of sympathy and caution. "That's Rusty," she said softly, glancing at the kennel. "He's been here a while, got some health issues, arthritis, malnutrition, maybe a heart problem. We've done what we can, but—" She trailed off, her eyes meeting Laura's, with a silent apology. Laura understood the unspoken message. Rusty was a lost cause, a drain on resources, a dog no one would choose. "He's not really up for the outreach program," Maggie added, trying to steer them back toward the puppies. "We've got some great ones over here," but Noah wasn't listening. He took a step closer to Rusty's kennel, his small hand reaching toward the chain link. "Hey," he whispered, his voice soft but clear. "You're scared, huh?" At the sound, Rusty's ears twitched, and for the first time that day, he lifted his head. His amber eyes, cloudy with pain, met Noah's, and his tail gave a single hesitant wag. The movement was so slight it might have gone unnoticed, but to Noah it was everything. A gasp escaped his lips, and a tiny smile broke across his face, a smile Laura hadn't seen in far too long. In that moment, the noisy shelter seemed to fade, leaving only a boy and a dog, two souls reaching across a divide of despair. Laura's breath caught, her mind racing. She knew what this moment could mean, and it terrified her. Rusty was a risk, medically, financially, emotionally. She couldn't afford a sick dog, not when she was already scraping by on her librarian's salary, not when Noah's therapy sessions ate up every spare dollar. But as she watched her son's face light up, watched Rusty struggle to shift closer to the gate, she felt a pull she couldn't explain. Was this a mistake? Or was it fate? The clock was ticking, and Rusty's fate hung in the balance. Would Laura walk away, or would she take a chance on a dog no one else wanted? Laura Bennett stood frozen beside Noah, her hazel eyes darting between her son's radiant face and the frail dog in the kennel. At 34, Laura carried the weight of a life, reshaped by loss. 2 years ago, her husband, Tom, had been diagnosed with leukemia, his vibrant laughter fading as hospital visits replaced their dreams of family adventures. He'd fought hard for Laura and for Noah, but the disease won, leaving Laura to navigate. Widowhood with a toddler who barely spoke, and a heart heavy with unfulfilled promises. She'd moved them to Willow Creek, a small town where the cost of living was kinder, taking a part-time job at the local library to piece together a life from the fragments Tom left behind. Their modest one-story house, with its chipped blue paint and sagging porch, was a far cry from the future she'd imagined, but it was theirs, held together by her fierce determination to give Noah stability. Noah, with his father's unruly brown curls and wide blue eyes, was a quiet mystery, even to Laura. At 5, he should have been chattering about superheroes or begging for ice cream, but grief had wrapped him in silence. He'd stopped speaking for weeks after Tom's death, and though words had slowly returned, they were sparse, reserved for moments of necessity. His teachers called it selective mutism, linked to anxiety. His therapist, Dr. Ellis, called it a coping mechanism, a shield against a world that had hurt him too soon. Laura saw it differently, a depth of feeling too vast for his small body, a sensitivity that made him flinch at loud noises, but notice the smallest details, like the way a leaf trembled in the wind, or now, the way a dying dog's eyes held a story of their own. Noah's insistence on Rusty wasn't just a whim. It was a declaration, a rare glimpse into the heart he kept so carefully guarded. The shelter's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Laura knelt beside Noah, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Sweetheart, Rusty's very sick," she said softly, her voice steady despite the churn of her thoughts. "He needs a lot of care, more than we might be able to give." Noah's eyes didn't leave Rusty, who had dragged himself closer to the gate, his movements pained but deliberate. "He's alone," Noah repeated, his voice small but firm, as if the dog's solitude was a crime only he could rectify. Laura's throat tightened. She knew that feeling, aloneness, the kind that settled into your bones when the world moved on without you. She'd felt it in the hospital waiting rooms, in the empty bed at night, in the pitying glances from neighbors who meant well but couldn't understand. Maggie, the shelter volunteer, shifted uncomfortably nearby, her clipboard a shield against the emotional weight of the moment. "I don't mean to rush you," she said, glancing at her watch, "but the outreach program is starting soon. The puppies are ready for the kids to walk." Her tone was kind but practical, a reminder of the shelter's reality. Rusty was a liability, a drain on resources, a dog whose medical chart read like a ledger of expenses no one could afford. Laura nodded absently, but her eyes were on Noah, who had pressed his palm against the chain link, his fingers curling as if he could will Rusty to stand. To her astonishment, Rusty responded, his nose nudging Noah's hand through the bars, a low whine escaping his throat. It wasn't a sound of pain but of recognition, as if he too saw something in Noah that no one else had. Laura's mind raced. She wasn't impulsive, she couldn't be, not when every dollar was accounted for, not when Noah's therapy sessions cost more than her grocery budget. Her salary barely covered the mortgage, utilities, and the second hand. Clothes she bought for Noah's growing frame. A dog, especially one with arthritis, malnutrition, and a possible heart condition, was a luxury, a risk, a complication she'd promised herself to avoid. Yet as she watched Noah's face, illuminated by a hope she hadn't seen since Tom used to read him bedtime stories, she felt her resolve waver. Tom had loved dogs, always talking about getting a border collie when Noah was old enough to play. "Fetch in the yard. They're smart," he'd said, his eyes bright despite the IV lines. "Loyal, they'd protect our boy." The memory stung, sharp and sweet, and Laura wondered if this was a sign or a trap. The shelter's front bell chimed again, pulling Laura's attention to a new group of visitors. A well-dressed couple, the Harrisons, known in Willow Creek for their sprawling estate and generous donations to local causes. Their presence added a new layer of tension. Laura had heard rumors of their interest in adopting a project pet to bolster their community image. Would they notice Rusty? And if they did, would they see what Noah saw or just a chance for publicity? Maggie's eyes flicked toward them, then back to Laura, a silent question hanging between them. Would Laura walk away, or would she stake a claim on a dog no one else wanted? Noah turned to her, his eyes pleading in a way words never could. "Mum, please," he whispered, his voice trembling with a conviction that pierced Laura's heart. She stood, brushing her hands on her jeans, her mind a battlefield of fear and faith. Rusty's amber eyes followed her, weary but trusting, as if he, too, sensed the crossroads they'd reached. The shelter's clock ticked louder in her ears, each second a reminder that Rusty's life hung in the balance. Could she say no to Noah, to Rusty, to the fragile thread of hope binding them together, or would she take a leap into the unknown, risking everything for a chance at healing? In the cramped, hopeful chaos of the Willow Creek Animal Shelter, Laura Bennett stood at a crossroads, her heart torn between caution and the radiant hope in her son Noah's eyes. 5-year-old Noah, silenced by grief, had found a spark of life in Rusty, a neglected border collie whose days were numbered. As Rusty's amber eyes met Noah's, a silent pact formed, a thread of trust that pulsed with the thrill of possibility and the shadow of loss. Laura, a widowed mother stretched thin by life's demands, felt the weight of an impossible choice: walk away from a dying dog or risk everything for a bond that might heal them all. With the shelter's clock ticking and the wealthy Harrisons circling, every moment crackled with suspense, weaving a heartwarming tale of courage, connection, and the transformative power of love for the forgotten. The air in the Willow Creek Animal Shelter seemed to still as Noah's small hand pressed against the chain link of Rusty's kennel, his fingers trembling with a quiet intensity. The border collie, whose matted fur and labored breathing had kept visitors at a distance, shifted closer, his nose brushing Noah's palm with a gentleness that belied his frail condition. A low whine, soft and almost pleading, escaped Rusty's throat, and his tail gave another faint wag, a flicker of life in a body worn down by neglect. Noah's blue eyes widened, a smile breaking across his face like sunlight through storm clouds. "You're scared, huh?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the shelter's clamor, yet carrying a weight that made Laura's heart skip. It was a question and a promise, a recognition of shared vulnerability that seemed to bridge the gap between boy and dog in an instant. Laura crouched beside Noah, her denim jacket brushing the cold concrete floor, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and wonder. She'd seen Noah retreat into himself after Tom's death, his laughter replaced by silence, his world shrinking to the safety of their small home. But here, in this sterile, noisy place, he was reaching out, his usual caution replaced by a fierce determination to connect with a dog no one else wanted. "Noah, honey," she said, her voice soft but firm, Rusty's not like the other dogs. He needs a lot of help to get better. She wanted to protect him, to shield him from the pain of loving something that might not survive, but the words felt hollow as she watched Rusty's eyes lock onto Noah's, as if the dog understood the boy's words in a way no one else could. Maggie, the shelter volunteer, hovered nearby, her clipboard clutched tightly, her expression a mix of sympathy and urgency. "He's got arthritis, malnutrition, and we suspect a heart murmur," she explained, her voice low to avoid alarming Noah. "The vet's been treating him, but it's expensive, and with the shelter so full—" She didn't finish, but the implication was clear. Rusty's kennel would soon be needed for a dog with a better chance. Laura nodded, her throat tightening as she glanced at the faded special needs sign on Rusty's gate. The Harrisons, standing a few kennels away, were cooing over a litter of fluffy puppies, but their sharp-eyed glances toward Rusty's corner sent a prickle of unease down Laura's spine. Were they considering him as a charity case, a way to burnish their reputation? The thought made her stomach churn. She couldn't let Noah's connection be reduced to a publicity stunt. Noah, oblivious to the adult's tension, leaned closer to the kennel, his forehead nearly touching the chain link. "It's okay," he murmured to Rusty, his voice steady now as if he were soothing a friend. "You don't have to be scared." To Laura's astonishment, Rusty struggled to his feet, his legs wobbling but his eyes never leaving Noah. He limped forward, each step a painful effort, until his nose pressed against the gate, directly opposite Noah's hand. The dog's tail wagged again, stronger this time, a rhythmic thump against the kennel floor that seemed to echo in Laura's chest. It was a moment of pure, unspoken understanding, a bond forged in the shared language of loss and resilience. Noah giggled, a rare musical sound that pierced Laura's heart, and turned to her, his eyes shining. "He likes me, Mom. He knows I'm here." Laura's breath caught, tears pricking her eyes. She hadn't heard Noah laugh like that since Tom used to tickle him during Saturday morning cartoons. The memory of her husband, his warm smile and unwavering optimism flooded her, mingling with the reality of the broken dog before her. Tom would have loved Rusty, would have seen the same spark Noah did. "They're fighters, border collies," he'd once said, dreaming of a dog to join. Their family. They don't give up. Was this Rusty fighting now, responding to Noah's gentleness, or was it a fleeting moment before the inevitable? Laura's practical side screamed to walk away. Her bank account couldn't handle vet bills, and Noah's fragile heart couldn't handle another loss. But her heart, the part that still believed in miracles, whispered that this connection was worth the risk. Maggie cleared her throat, breaking the spell. "The outreach program's about to start," she said, glancing toward the Harrisons, who were now speaking with another volunteer, their voices carrying a tone of calculated interest. "If you want to join the group, the puppies are ready." Her words were a gentle nudge, a reminder that Rusty wasn't part of the plan, that Laura and Noah were here for a simple activity, not a life-altering decision. But Noah shook his gi, head, his small body rooted to the spot. "I want to stay with him," he said, his voice clear and unwavering, a declaration that stunned Laura with its strength. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading but resolute. "He needs us, Mom. Please." The shelter's noise faded to a hum as Laura met Noah's gaze, seeing not just her son, but the boy Tom had believed in, a boy with a heart big enough to love, the unlovable. Rusty whined again, softer now, his head resting against the gate as if exhausted by his effort, but unwilling to break the connection. The Harrisons' laughter rang out from the puppy pen, a stark contrast to the quiet intensity of this moment. Laura felt the weight of time pressing in. Rusty's days were numbered and Noah's trust in her hung in the balance. Could she say yes to this fragile hope, knowing the cost might be more than she could bear? Or would she pull Noah away, protecting them both from a heartbreak that seemed all too certain? Laura's knees ached against the cold concrete of the shelter floor as she crouched beside Noah, her hand still resting on his small shoulder. His words, "He needs us, Mom," echoed in her mind, each syllable a dagger of love and fear. Noah's blue eyes, so like Tom's, held a conviction she hadn't seen since before her husband's illness, stole their light. Rusty, The border collie in the kennel before them had managed to stand, his trembling legs and patchy fur a testament to a life of hardship. His amber eyes, clouded but alert, seemed to plead alongside Noah, as if he too sensed the weight of this moment. Laura wanted to scoop her son up and flee, to escape the pull of this broken animal and the complications he represented, but the memory of Noah's giggle, so rare and precious, anchored her in place. At 34, Laura was no stranger to hard choices. When Tom's leukemia diagnosis came, she'd quit her teaching job to care for him, burning through their savings as medical bills piled up. After his death, she'd sold their old home in the city, moving to Willow Creek for a cheaper life and a part-time job at the library. The work barely covered their expenses, the mortgage on their weathered house, Noah's therapy for his anxiety and selective mutism, and the small comforts she stretched to afford, like second-hand books for Noah's bedtime stories. Every month was a balancing act, a dance of delayed bills and skipped meals to ensure Noah had what he needed. A dog, especially one with Rusty's litany of ailments, arthritis, malnutrition, a suspected heart murmur, wasn't just a luxury. It was a financial cliff she couldn't afford to leap from. Yet as she watched Noah press his forehead against the kennel gate, whispering to Rusty as if they shared a secret language, Laura felt the tug of something deeper than practicality. Noah had been 3 when Tom died, too young to understand but old enough to feel the void. He'd stopped speaking to strangers, retreated from friends, and clung to Laura with a quiet intensity that broke her heart. His therapist, Dr. Ellis, had warned that Noah's anxiety could worsen without outlets for connection, but nothing, not playgroups, not art classes, had reached him. Until now. Rusty, with his matted fur and faltering steps, had done what no one else could. He'd drawn Noah out, given him a reason to speak, to smile, to hope. Could she take that away, even to protect them from the risks? Maggie, the shelter. Volunteer. Shifted her weight, her clipboard a silent reminder of the world beyond this moment. Laura, I hate to push, but the outreach program's starting, she said, her voice gentle but firm. If you're not sure about Rusty, maybe Noah could walk a puppy. It's safer, easier. Her eyes flicked toward the Harrisons, who were now speaking with the shelter director, their polished voices carrying a hint of entitlement. Laura's stomach twisted. The Harrisons, with their wealth and influence, could sweep in and claim Rusty as a cause, turning Noah's connection into a footnote in their charity portfolio. The thought made her bristle, but it also sharpened her fear. They could afford Rusty's care, medications, surgeries, a sprawling yard, while Laura could barely afford Noah's school supplies. Noah turned to her, his small hand clutching the edge of her jacket. "Mom, he's sad," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "Like me sometimes." The confession hit Laura like a physical blow, stealing her breath. She'd known Noah carried pain, but to hear him name it, to see him link it to Rusty's quiet suffering, was both devastating and illuminating. She thought of Tom, who'd faced his illness with a stubborn optimism, always saying, "We don't give up on what matters." Was Rusty what mattered now, or was she fooling herself, chasing a moment of joy that could end in heartbreak? The shelter's fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance with her doubts. Laura's mind churned through the logistics. Vet bills could run into the thousands, money she didn't have. Her car, a 15-year-old sedan, was already on its last legs. Her credit card was maxed out from last month's unexpected plumbing repair. And Noah, his therapy was non-negotiable, his stability her top priority. What if caring for Rusty stretched her too thin, leaving her unable to support her son? Yet, as she looked at Noah's face, a light with a purpose she hadn't seen since Tom's death, she wondered if denying him this connection would do more harm than any financial strain. Rusty whined softly, his nose still pressed against the gate as if urging her to decide. The Harrisons' laughter rang out again, closer now, and Laura felt time slipping away, each second a step closer to losing Rusty, to the shelter's deadline, to the Harrisons' wealth, to her own fear. She stood, brushing her hands on her jeans, her heart racing with the thrill of a choice she wasn't ready to make. "Maggie," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, Can we talk? To the vet about Rusty? Just to understand what he needs? It wasn't a commitment, not yet, but it was a step, a crack in the wall she'd built around their fragile life. Noah's face lit up, and Rusty's tail thumped weakly, as if they both sensed the shift. The Harrisons turned, their eyes narrowing, slightly, and Laura felt the weight of their scrutiny, the shelter's ticking clock and the fragile hope in her son's eyes. Could she find a way to make this work, or was she setting them all up for a fall? Laura's heart pounded as she faced Maggie, the shelter volunteer, her words still echoing in the noisy shelter. Can we talk to the vet about Rusty? It wasn't a promise, but it was a crack in her armor, a concession to the hope in Noah's eyes and the memory of Tom's belief in fighting for what mattered. Noah's small hand tightened around hers, his smile a beacon in the dim light of Rusty's kennel. The border collie, trembling but alert, watched them with a trust that made Laura's chest ache. His matted fur and labored breathing were a stark reminder of the risks, medical, financial, emotional, but Noah's giggle, so rare since Tom's death, was a siren call she couldn't ignore. Maggie's eyebrows rose, surprise softening her practical demeanor. You're serious about Rusty? She asked, glancing at the special needs sign on the kennel. I can get Dr. Patel, but I need to warn you, he's a big commitment. The arthritis alone requires daily meds and… The heart murmur. She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the Harrisons, who were now speaking with the shelter director, their polished voices cutting through the barks. Laura nodded, her throat tight. She knew the stakes. Her library salary was stretched thin, Noah's therapy non-negotiable, and her savings non-existent. Yet as Noah whispered, "He's waiting, Mum," to Rusty, who responded with a weak thump of his tail, Laura felt a pull stronger than fear, a sense that this dog, this moment, was meant for them. The shelter's fluorescent lights buzzed as Maggie led them to a small exam room, where Dr. Patel, a wiry veterinarian with kind eyes, was reviewing charts. Noah clung to Laura's side, his usual shyness tempered by his focus on Rusty, who was gently carried in by a volunteer. The dog's legs wobbled as he was set on the table, but his eyes stayed fixed on Noah, as if the boy were his anchor. Dr. Patel examined Rusty, his hands moving with practiced care. "He's malnourished, no question," he said, his voice steady but grave. "The arthritis is advanced and the heart murmur suggests a congenital issue. With treatment, meds, a special diet, maybe surgery, he could have good years left. Without it…" He didn't finish, but the weight of euthanasia hung heavy in the room. Laura's stomach churned as Dr. Patel outlined the costs: $200 a month for medications and food, thousands for potential heart surgery. Her mind flashed to her bank account, $300 left after this month's bills, with Noah's therapy due next week. She thought of Tom, who dreamed of a border collie for their family, his voice echoing, "They're loyal, Laura. They'd protect our boy." But Tom wasn't here to help with vet bills or soothe Noah if Rusty didn't make it. "What's the first step?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute, surprising even herself. Noah looked up, his eyes wide with hope, and Rusty's ears twitched as if he understood. Dr. Patel softened. "We could start with a foster-to-adopt trial. The shelter covers initial meds and I can discount the first visit. It gives you time to see if it's manageable." Laura's pulse raced. A trial wasn't a full commitment, but it was a leap into vet appointments, budget cuts, and the risk of Noah's heartbreaking if Rusty's health failed. Yet as Noah reached out, his small hand hovering near Rusty's muzzle, and the dog leaned into his touch, Laura saw something she couldn't deny. Her son was alive in a way he hadn't been since Tom's death. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's try it." The decision felt like stepping off a cliff, thrilling and terrifying. Maggie's face lit up, but the Harrisons, now lingering near the exam room door, exchanged a glance that sent a chill through Laura. "That's the dog you're considering?" Mrs. Harrison asked, her tone dripping with concern. "We were thinking of taking him ourselves. Our estate's perfect for a dog like that, and we can cover all his care." Her husband nodded, his smile practiced. Laura's jaw tightened. Were they genuine, Or was this a play for community goodwill? Noah's hand froze on Rusty's fur, his eyes darting to Laura, fear creeping into his expression. Maggie stepped in, her voice firm. "Laura's starting a foster trial with Rusty. It's already in motion." The Harrisons' smiles faltered, but they nodded, retreating with a promise to check in. Laura's relief was short-lived as the reality of her choice sank in. Getting Rusty to their car was a struggle. He was too weak to jump, and Laura's arms trembled as she half-carried him, his weight heavier than his frail frame suggested. Noah trailed behind, clutching Rusty's leash like a lifeline, his silence returning as the shelter's noise faded. In the car, Rusty lay across the back seat, his breathing uneven, and Laura gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing. Their house wasn't ready. No dog bed, no space for messes. Her budget wasn't ready, her heart wasn't ready. As they pulled away, Noah's voice broke the silence. "He's coming home, right, Mom?" His eyes, reflected in the rearview mirror, were bright with trust. Laura forced a smile, her heart swelling with love and dread. "Yeah, sweetheart. For now." Rusty lifted his head, his amber eyes meeting hers in the mirror, and Laura felt the weight of his trust too. The road ahead was uncertain, meds to administer, bills to juggle, the Harrisons' lingering interest. But in that moment, with Noah's hope and Rusty's quiet strength beside her, she felt a spark of courage. Had she made the right choice, or was this the start of a heartbreak they couldn't survive? Laura's old sedan rattled as she pulled into the driveway of their modest Willow Creek home, its chipped blue paint and sagging porch a mirror of her own weathered spirit. Rusty lay across the back seat, his breathing shallow but steady, while Noah clutched the dog's leash, his small face alight with a purpose Laura hadn't seen since before Tom's death. Getting Rusty inside was a challenge. The 3 steps to the front door might as well have been a mountain. Laura fashioned a makeshift sling from an old blanket, her arms straining as she guided the border collie's trembling frame, his arthritic legs faltering with each step. Noah hovered close, whispering, "You're almost home, Rusty," his voice a soft anchor in the evening's quiet. Inside, Laura settled Rusty on a folded quilt in the living room, his amber eyes tracking Noah's every move as the boy sat, cross-legged beside him, stroking his patchy fur with a tenderness that made Laura's heart ache. The reality of their choice hit hard as Laura unpacked the shelter's starter kit, a small bag of prescription food, a bottle of arthritis medication, and instructions for twice-daily doses. Dr. Patel's words echoed, $200 a month for Rusty's care, thousands if surgery was needed for his heart murmur. Laura's library salary, already stretched by Noah's, therapy and their basic needs, offered no room for such expenses. She glanced at Noah, who was reading a picture book to Rusty, his voice clearer than it had been in months. And the bear said, "Don't be afraid," Noah read, pausing, to look at Rusty as if expecting a response. The dog's tail thumped weakly, and Noah giggled, a sound that felt like a gift. Laura knew she couldn't take this away from him, but the question gnawed. How would they make it work? Help came unexpectedly from their neighbor, Mrs. Clara, a retired nurse with a warm smile and a knack for fixing things, broken toys, scraped knees, and now perhaps a broken dog. She knocked on their door that evening, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun, carrying a tray of homemade oatmeal cookies. "Heard you brought home a new friend," she said, peering at Rusty with a mix of curiosity and compassion. Laura explained, the foster trial, her voice betraying her worry about the costs and Rusty's needs. Mrs. Clara waved a hand dismissively. "I've given shots to soldiers and kids. I can handle a dog's pills. Let me help with his meds when you're at work." Her offer was a lifeline, easing Laura's fear of managing Rusty's care alone. Dr. Patel, too, called to confirm he'd discount Rusty's follow-up visits, his voice kind but firm. "He's got a chance, Laura, but it won't be easy." The town of Willow Creek, small and tight-knit, began to take notice. At the library the next day, Laura's co-worker, Jenny, spread the word about Rusty, her enthusiasm drawing curious glances from patrons. "A sick dog and a single mom? That's a story," Jenny said, already planning to share it on the town's community board. Laura smiled weakly, grateful but uneasy. Attention could bring support, but it could also bring judgment. Her fears were confirmed when the Harrisons appeared at the library, their sleek SUV parked ostentatiously outside. Mrs. Harrison, in a tailored blazer, approached Laura at the circulation desk, her smile as polished as her pearl earrings. "We saw that dog you took home," she said, her tone dripping with concern. "Rusty, was it? We're worried he's too much for you, dear. Our estate has room, and we can pay for his surgery outright." Laura's grip tightened on a stack of books, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "Rusty's with us now. Noah's bonded with him." Mr. Harrison stepped forward, his voice smooth but patronizing. "We're just thinking of the dog's welfare. And your son's. Raising a child alone is hard enough without a sick animal draining your resources." The words stung, echoing Laura's own doubts, but they also sparked a protective fire. Noah needed Rusty, and Rusty needed them. Money couldn't buy that connection. "We're managing," Laura said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for your concern." The Harrisons exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable, and left with a promise to keep in touch, leaving Laura with a sinking feeling that their interest wasn't over. Back home, Rusty's presence began to shift the air. Noah, usually withdrawn after school, raced to the living room to sit with the dog, his silence giving way to soft chatter about his day. "Miss Carter said my drawing was good," he told Rusty, who lifted his head, ears perked as if listening. Laura watched from the kitchen, her heart swelling even as worry gnawed at her. The community's support, Mrs. Clara's help, Dr. Patel's discounts, Jenny's enthusiasm, was a start, but the Harrisons' words lingered like a threat. What if they pushed harder, using their influence to question her fitness as a foster? What if Rusty's health worsened, proving them right? As she measured out his medication, her hands trembling, Laura felt the suspense of their fragile new life. Rusty's tail thumped as Noah hugged him, and Laura whispered to herself, "We can do this." But could they, with the town watching and the Harrisons waiting for her to falter? The modest home of Laura Bennett in Willow Creek had become a sanctuary for a fragile new family, where Rusty, a neglected border collie, was weaving hope into the lives of a widowed mother and her grief-stricken son. Noah. Laura's decision to foster Rusty, despite his daunting medical needs and the looming threat of the wealthy Harrisons, was a gamble fueled by Noah's rare smiles and the memory of her late husband, Tom's love for dogs. With the shelter's deadline behind them, new challenges emerged: financial strain, community scrutiny, and the ever-present risk of Rusty's failing health. Yet as Rusty's gentle presence began to transform their lives, the suspense of their journey deepened, crafting a heartwarming tale of healing, resilience, and the quiet miracles born from love for the overlooked. Laura stood in the doorway of their small living room, a mug of lukewarm coffee in her hands, watching Noah curl up beside Rusty on the quilt that had become the dog's bed. The border collie, still frail with patchy fur and a limp, lay with his head resting near Noah's knee, his amber eyes half closed but alert, as if guarding the boy even in his exhaustion. Noah, usually silent after a long day at kindergarten, was talking softly, his voice a gentle stream of words about a butterfly he'd seen at recess. "It was yellow, Rusty, and it landed right on my shoe," he said, his fingers tracing the dog's ear with a tenderness that made Laura's heart swell. Rusty's tail thumped once, a weak but deliberate response, and Noah's face lit up with a smile that had been all too rare since Tom's death 2 years ago. In the week since bringing Rusty home, Laura had seen changes in Noah she hadn't dared hope for. Her 5-year-old, whose anxiety and selective mutism had built walls between him and the world, was opening up in Rusty's presence. At school, his teacher reported that Noah had spoken twice in class, once to answer a question about animals, once to tell a classmate about his dog. At home, he no longer retreated to his room after dinner. Instead, he spent hours with Rusty, reading picture books or simply lying beside him, their breathing syncing in a quiet rhythm. Laura noticed how Rusty seemed to sense Noah's moods, nudging closer when the boy's hands trembled with unspoken worry, or resting his head on Noah's lap during moments of silence. It was as if the dog, despite his own pain, had made Noah his mission, offering a companionship that reached where words could not. For Laura, Rusty's impact was both a balm and a burden. She'd spent sleepless nights calculating their budget, skipping her own lunches to afford Rusty's prescription food and medications. Mrs. Clara's help with administering pills and Dr. Patel's discounted vet visits were godsends, but the looming cost of Rusty's potential heart surgery, thousands. She didn't have hung over her like a storm cloud. Yet watching Noah blossom, Laura felt a flicker of Tom's stubborn optimism. Her husband had always believed in the power of small acts, in the way love could rebuild what loss had broken. "He's helping Noah," she whispered to herself, wiping away a tear as Noah giggled when Rusty licked his hand. But the question lingered. Could she sustain this miracle, or would Rusty's needs overwhelm their fragile life? The community of Willow Creek was a mixed blessing. Word of Rusty's foster trial had spread, thanks to Jenny's enthusiastic posts on the town's online board. Neighbors dropped by with small gifts, a bag of dog treats, an old pet bed, moved by Noah's bond with the sick dog. At the library, patrons asked Laura for updates, their smiles warm but sometimes tinged with pity. "You're brave taking on a dog like that," one woman said, her tone implying Laura was either a saint or a fool. The support buoyed Laura, but it also exposed her to scrutiny. The Harrisons, ever present in town gossip, had begun spreading subtle doubts. At a church coffee hour, Mrs. Harrison cornered Laura, her voice syrupy with concern. "We just worry about Noah, dear. A sick dog is such a strain, and with your situation—" She trailed off, her implication clear. Laura's choice was reckless, selfish even. Laura's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "Noah's happier than he's been in years," she said, her voice steady. "Rusty's good for him." Mrs. Harrison's smile tightened, and Mr. Harrison, standing nearby, added, "We'd still love to take Rusty. Our resources could give him the best care." The offer, cloaked in generosity, felt like a challenge, a reminder of their wealth, and Laura's lack. She thanked them politely, but her heart raced as she walked away, the Harrisons' words echoing her deepest fears. What if they were right? What if Rusty's needs tipped her into financial ruin, leaving Noah vulnerable? The suspense of their judgment, coupled with Rusty's uncertain health, made every day a tightrope walk. That evening, as Laura prepared Rusty's medication, Noah sat beside the dog, his small hands gentle on Rusty's flank. "You're getting stronger, aren't you?" he said, his voice full of conviction. Rusty lifted his head, his eyes clearer than they'd been at the shelter, and gave a soft whine, as if agreeing. Laura paused, syringe in hand, struck by the dog's resilience. Despite his arthritis, despite the heart murmur, Rusty seemed to draw strength from Noah, his movements less pained when the boy was near. It was a quiet miracle, one that made her decision to foster him feel less like a risk and more like a calling. But as she glanced at the stack of bills on the counter, the Harrisons' offer loomed large. Could she keep Rusty safe from their influence? And would the community's support be enough to see them through? Laura's heart sank as she read the note from Noah's kindergarten teacher, slipped into his backpack after school. "Noah had a severe anxiety attack today during recess. He's okay now, but please call to discuss." The words blurred on. The page, her hands trembling as she stood in their cramped kitchen, the scent of Rusty's prescription food lingering in the air. Noah, oblivious to her worry, sat in the living room, reading to Rusty from a tattered copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. The border collie lay on his quilt, his amber eyes fixed on the boy, his tail giving a weak thump at each pause in the story. Laura forced a smile as Noah glanced up, but inside panic churned. She'd thought Rusty was helping Noah's anxiety, but this attack, his worst in months, shattered that hope. Had she misjudged, putting her son's fragile stability at risk, for a dog they could barely afford? The call to the teacher, Mrs. Carter, confirmed Laura's fears. "Noah was playing alone when he started hyperventilating," she explained, her voice gentle but concerned. "He kept saying he needed Rusty, that something was wrong with him. It took us 20 minutes to calm him." Laura's stomach twisted. Noah had never mentioned Rusty at school before, and the idea that he sensed something about the dog from miles away unnerved her. She thanked Mrs. Carter, promising to follow up with Noah's therapist, but as she hung up, a new fear gripped her. Was Rusty's presence meant to heal, somehow triggering Noah's anxiety instead? Rushing to check on Rusty, Laura found him still on his quilt, but his breathing seemed shallower, his eyes less focused. She knelt beside him, her fingers brushing his patchy fur, and noticed a slight tremble in his limbs. "What's wrong?" "Boy?" she whispered, her voice tight with worry. Noah looked up, his blue eyes wide with alarm. "Is Rusty okay, Mom?" he asked, his voice quavering. Laura forced a reassuring nod, but her mind raced. Rusty's arthritis meds and special. Diet had improved his strength, but Dr. Patel had warned that his heart murmur could worsen without warning. Had that moment come? She grabbed her phone to call the vet, her hands shaking as she dialed, the weight of Noah's anxiety attack and Rusty's fragility crashing over her. The crisis escalated before Dr. Patel could answer. A loud crash echoed from the back door, followed by a pained yelp. Laura and Noah raced to find Rusty sprawled on the floor, a toppled chair beside him, his legs scrabbling as he tried to stand. Blood seeped from a gash on his hind leg, and his whimpers cut through Laura's heart. "Rusty!" Noah cried, tears streaming down his face as he reached for the dog. Laura pulled him back gently, her own panic rising. "Stay there, sweetheart," she said, her voice firm despite her fear. She wrapped Rusty in a towel, her arms trembling as she lifted his frail body, his weight heavier with pain. The gash wasn't deep, but his labored breathing and dazed eyes screamed emergency. She called Mrs. Clara, who arrived in minutes to watch Noah, then rushed Rusty to the vet, her sedan's engine groaning under the strain. At the clinic, Dr. Patel's face was grim as he examined Rusty. "He's torn a ligament trying to get out, likely stressed from being alone," he said, his hands moving quickly to clean the wound. "But the bigger issue is his heart. The murmurs progressed. Stress or exertion could have triggered this. He needs surgery soon or he won't last long." Laura's knees buckled, and she gripped the exam table for support. The cost, he estimated, was $4,000, more than her annual savings. Her credit card was maxed, her paycheck already allocated to Noah's therapy and bills. "Can we stabilize him for now?" she asked, her voice breaking. Dr. Patel nodded, administering a sedative and fluids, but his warning was clear: "You've got a month, maybe less." As if the day hadn't tested her enough, a knock came at the clinic's waiting room door. A woman in a crisp blazer introduced herself as Ms. Turner from Animal Welfare Services. "We received a complaint about Rusty's care," she said, her tone professional but cold. "The complainants, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, claim you're unable to provide for his medical needs, putting him at risk." Laura's blood ran cold. The Harrisons had made good on their veiled threats, using their influence to challenge her foster agreement. Ms. Turner handed her a notice. A home inspection was scheduled in 3 days to assess Rusty's environment. "If we find evidence of neglect," she added, "we may need to rehome him." Laura's vision blurred with tears, the Harrisons' words from the library echoing, "A sick dog is such a strain." Driving home with Rusty sedated in the back seat, Laura felt the world closing in. Noah's anxiety attack, Rusty's injury, the looming surgery, and now the Harrisons' complaint. It was too much. She glanced at Rusty's still form, his breathing steadier but weak, and thought of Noah, waiting at home, his trust in her hanging by a thread. The community's support, Mrs. Clara, Dr. Patel, the neighbors' small gifts, felt like a lifeline, but it wasn't enough to bridge the financial gap or silence the Harrisons' influence. Could she fight for Rusty, for Noah, for their fragile family? Or had her leap of faith led them to a breaking point? Laura sat at her kitchen table late that night, the house silent except for Rusty's shallow breaths from his quilt in the living room. Noah was asleep, his tear-streaked face finally peaceful after hours of worrying about Rusty. The vet's warning, surgery within a month or Rusty wouldn't survive, looped in her mind, each word a weight on her already burdened shoulders. The animal welfare notice lay beside a stack of overdue bills, Ms. Turner's words etched in her memory. "If we find evidence of neglect, we may need to rehome him." The Harrisons' influence, their wealth, their pristine estate, it all loomed like an unbeatable foe. Laura's library salary couldn't cover $4,000, not when Noah's therapy and their basic needs already claimed every cent. Her hands shook as she clutched her coffee mug, the cold reality sinking in. She might lose Rusty, and with him, Noah's fragile progress. Desperation sparked an idea she'd resisted until now. She opened her laptop, its screen flickering from years of use, and created a crowdfunding page titled Rusty's Road to Recovery. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, shame burning in her chest. Asking for help felt like admitting failure. But Noah's smile, Rusty's trusting eyes, and Tom's voice whispering, "Don't give up on what matters," pushed her forward. She wrote honestly, a single mother, a quiet boy finding his voice through a sick dog, a family fighting to save a life against impossible odds. She uploaded a photo of Noah and Rusty from their first day home, the boy's hand resting on the dog's head, both gazing at each other with unspoken trust. "We don't expect miracles," she wrote, "but if you can spare anything, Rusty deserves a chance." She set the goal at $5,000, enough for surgery and follow-up care, and hit publish, her heart racing with hope and dread. The next morning, Laura checked the page before dawn, expecting little. To her shock, $150 had trickled in, small donations from library patrons and neighbors, each with a message of support. "Noah's a sweet kid. Keep fighting," wrote Jenny, her co-worker. "Rusty's lucky to have you," said an anonymous donor. The amounts were modest, $5, $10, but they were a spark, a sign that Willow Creek was listening. At the library, Jenny took it further, printing flyers with the crowdfunding link and posting them around town. "This is a story people need to hear," she said, her eyes bright with conviction. Laura managed a grateful nod, but the Harrisons' complaint gnawed at her. Would the community's goodwill be enough to sway animal welfare, or would the Harrisons' influence prevail? Mrs. Clara, ever the rock, arrived that afternoon to help with Rusty's meds, her presence a balm to Laura's frayed nerves. As she showed Laura how to clean Rusty's gash, she shared news that spread like wildfire. The local newspaper, the Willow Creek Gazette, had picked up Rusty's story. A young reporter, Sarah Mills, had seen the crowdfunding page and wanted to interview Laura for a human interest piece. "It could boost donations," Mrs. Clara urged, her hands steady as she bandaged Rusty's leg. Laura hesitated, her instinct to shield Noah from public scrutiny clashing with the urgent need for funds. Rusty, lying quietly, lifted his head to nudge Noah's hand, who was sitting beside him coloring. The boy's soft, "You're gonna be okay, Rusty," tipped the scales. "All right," Laura said, her voice firm. "For Rusty." The interview took place the next day in their living room, Sarah Mills perched on their worn couch, her notebook open. Noah sat with Rusty, his shyness eased by the dog's presence, while Laura recounted their journey, the shelter, Noah's connection, the financial strain. Sarah's questions were gentle but probing, and when she asked, "Why take on a dog like Rusty when it's so hard?" Laura's answer came from the heart. "Because he's giving Noah back to me," she said, her voice catching as she looked at her son, who was whispering to Rusty. "He's worth every struggle." Sarah nodded, her eyes misty, and promised the article would run tomorrow, complete with the crowdfunding link. As Sarah left, an unexpected visitor arrived, Mr. Dawson, a retired firefighter with a grizzled beard and a quiet demeanor. He'd read about Rusty online and asked to see the dog. Kneeling beside Rusty, he ran a hand along the border collie's flank, his expression softening. "I knew a dog like him once," he said, his voice low. "Rusty was a therapy dog trainee years ago before his health issues got him dropped from the program. He's got a heart for helping." Laura's breath caught. Rusty's past added a new layer to his bond with Noah. Mr. Dawson stood, pulling out a check for $1,000. "For his surgery," he said gruffly. "Kids like Noah need dogs like Rusty." Tears pricked Laura's eyes. As she thanked him, the donation a lifeline that brought the fundraiser to $2,200. The community's response was a growing tide, but the Harrisons' shadow lingered. At the library, Laura overheard whispers, "The Harrisons say they'd give Rusty a better home." The animal welfare inspection loomed, and Laura knew one misstep could cost them everything. Rusty, though weaker, seemed to sense the stakes, his eyes following Noah with a protective intensity. As Laura updated the crowdfunding page with Mr. Dawson's donation, her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Articles live tomorrow. Brace for impact. Would the town's support hold against the Harrisons' influence, or was Laura fighting a losing battle? Laura woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through her living room curtains, her neck stiff from dozing on the couch beside Rusty's quilt. The border collie lay curled up, his breathing uneven but steady, his amber eyes half open as Noah slept beside him, one small hand resting on the dog's flank. The Willow Creek Gazette article had hit newsstands that morning, its headline, "Boy." And Dog Defy Odds in Heartfelt Bond, splashed across the front page with a photo of Noah and Rusty, their gazes locked in quiet trust. Laura's phone buzzed with notifications. The crowdfunding page had surged to $3,800 overnight, fueled by donations from strangers as far as the next county. Messages flooded in. "Rusty's a fighter. Noah's an inspiration," each one a spark of hope. But the animal welfare inspection scheduled for tomorrow loomed like a storm, and Rusty's surgery, now set for next week, was a race against his fading strength. The article's impact was immediate and double-edged. At the library, patrons stopped Laura to offer hugs and small cash donations, their eyes misty with empathy. Jenny, her co-worker, taped the article to the circulation desk, declaring, "This is what Willow Creek's about." Yet, whispers of dissent followed. At the grocery store, Laura overheard a woman mutter, "Spending thousands on a dog when she's got a kid to raise? Irresponsible." The Harrisons, silent since the complaint, were spotted at the town hall, their sleek SUV parked beside the animal welfare office. Laura's stomach churned. Were they pressing their case, using their influence to sway Ms. Turner? The thought made her grip Noah's hand tighter as they walked home, Rusty's leash in his other hand, the dog's steps slow but determined. Rusty's condition added urgency to the mounting tension. Dr. Patel's latest exam the day before had been sobering. The heart murmur was straining Rusty's system, and his ligament injury had slowed his recovery. "He's fighting," Dr. Patel said, adjusting Rusty's meds, "but he's weaker than I'd like going into surgery." Laura had nodded, her throat too tight to speak, as Noah clung to Rusty's side, whispering, "You're strong, boy." Back home, she'd scrubbed every inch of their house, ensuring it was spotless for the inspection. Mrs. Clara helped, her steady hands polishing surfaces while offering quiet reassurance. "You're doing right by that dog and your boy." But Laura's fear gnawed. Would a clean house and $3,800 be enough to prove Rusty belonged with them? The day of the inspection arrived with a grey drizzle, mirroring Laura's mood. Ms. Turner arrived promptly at 10 a.m., her clipboard and neutral expression a stark contrast to the warmth of Willow Creek's support. Noah, clutching Rusty's leash, stood close to Laura, his eyes wary but brave. Rusty, medicated and bandaged, managed to sit up, his tail thumping weakly as Ms. Turner knelt to examine him. "He's receiving care," she noted, checking his meds and food supply. "But his condition is serious. Can you afford the surgery?" Laura's voice trembled but held firm. "We're close to our fundraising goal and the community's behind us." She showed Ms. Turner the crowdfunding page, now at $4,200, and the newspaper article, her hands shaking as she pointed to Noah's smile in the photo. Ms. Turner toured the house, her pen scratching notes as she checked Noah's room, the kitchen, and the small backyard. Laura's heart pounded. Every scuff on the wall, every worn piece of furniture felt like evidence against her. Noah, sensing the stakes, stayed by Rusty's side, his voice soft but clear. "Rusty helps me when I'm scared." Ms. Turner's expression softened, but she said little, her final question cutting deep. "If the surgery fails? Or if you can't sustain his care, what then?" Laura swallowed, meeting her gaze. "We'll do whatever it takes. Rusty's family." Ms. Turner nodded, promising a decision by day's end, and left, leaving Laura and Noah in a suffocating silence, Rusty's labored breathing the only sound. Hours later, as Laura prepared Noah's dinner, her phone rang. Dr. Patel, his voice urgent, "Rusty needs to come in now. His heart rate's irregular and we can't wait for the scheduled surgery." Laura's world tilted. She called Mrs. Clara to watch Noah, bundled Rusty into the car, and sped to the clinic, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel. At the vet, Dr. Patel prepped Rusty for emergency surgery, explaining, "We've got a donor heart specialist on call thanks to the fundraiser's visibility. It's now or never." Laura knelt beside Rusty, his eyes cloudy but trusting, and whispered, "Fight for Noah, okay?" Noah's words from that morning echoed, "Rusty's got to stay, Mom," and tears streamed down her face as the vet tech wheeled Rusty away. As Laura paced the clinic's waiting room, her phone buzzed with a voicemail from Ms. Turner. Her heart stopped, fearing the worst, but the message was a lifeline. "After reviewing your case, we find no evidence of neglect. Rusty can stay, provided you meet his medical needs." Relief crashed over her, but it was bittersweet. Rusty's life hung in the balance, the surgery's outcome uncertain. The crowdfunding page ticked to $4,800, so close to the goal, and messages poured in from Willow Creek, urging Rusty to pull through. Laura clung to Noah's trust, Rusty's resilience, and the community's faith, but the suspense was unbearable. Would Rusty survive, cementing their family's bond, or had their fight come too late? Laura sat in the sterile waiting room of Willow Creek Veterinary Clinic, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the linoleum floor, while the clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness. Rusty's emergency heart surgery had begun 2 hours ago, and each passing minute felt like a tightrope walk between hope and dread. Noah, left at home with Mrs. Clara, had clung to Laura before she left, his blue eyes wide with fear. "Rusty's coming back, right, Mom?" he'd asked, his voice trembling. Laura had forced a smile, whispering, "He's fighting, sweetheart." But the uncertainty gnawed at her. The crowdfunding page, now at $5,100, was a testament to Willow Creek's faith. But no amount of money could guarantee Rusty's survival. Dr. Patel emerged through the swinging doors, his surgical mask pulled down, his expression weary but cautiously optimistic. Laura stood, her heart in her throat, searching his face for answers. "The surgery went as well as we could hope," he said, his voice steady. "The specialist repaired the defect causing the murmur, and Rusty's heart is stable, for now. But he's weak. Malnutrition and stress took a toll. The next 24 hours are critical." Laura's knees weakened, relief and fear colliding. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Patel nodded, leading her to a recovery room where Rusty lay on a padded table, an IV line in his foreleg, monitors beeping softly. His black and white fur was shaved in patches, his eyes closed, but his chest rose and fell with a rhythm that felt like a miracle. Laura knelt beside him, her fingers hovering over his bandaged form, afraid to touch, but desperate to connect. "You did it, Rusty," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Noah's waiting for you." At the sound of her voice, Rusty's ear twitched, a faint sign of awareness that sparked hope in her chest. Dr. Patel touched her shoulder. "Talk to him. It helps." For the next hour, Laura sat by Rusty's side, recounting Noah's stories, their small home, the life waiting for him. She spoke of Tom, whose love for dogs had planted the seed for this journey, and of Willow Creek, which had rallied to save him. Occasionally, Rusty's tail flicked, a weak but deliberate response that felt like a promise to keep fighting. Returning home, Laura found Noah curled up on the couch with Mrs. Clara, his eyes red from crying. "Is Rusty okay?" he asked, leaping to his feet. Laura hugged him tightly, her voice soft but firm. "He's resting, sweetheart. The doctors fixed his heart and he's trying hard to come back to us." Noah's face lit up, a smile breaking through his worry, and he hugged her back, his small body trembling with relief. Mrs. Clara, wiping her own eyes, handed Laura a stack of cards from neighbors, each filled with well wishes for Rusty's recovery. The community's support, sparked by the Gazette article, had grown into a wave. Donations now at $5,500, enough for surgery and follow-up care, with some left to cover Rusty's ongoing meds. Over the next week, Rusty's recovery was a slow but steady miracle. Dr. Patel reported daily improvements. His heart rate stabilized, his appetite returned, and his fur began to grow back, thicker and glossier than before. By day 5, he was strong enough to stand, his limp less pronounced, his amber eyes clearer. Laura and Noah visited him at the clinic, Noah's joy spilling over as Rusty nudged his hand, tail wagging with newfound energy. "You're my best friend," Noah whispered, and Rusty's soft whine seemed to agree. Laura watched, her heart swelling with gratitude but also with a new resolve. Rusty's survival wasn't just a victory. It was a call to protect the bond he'd forged with Noah. The transformation extended beyond Rusty. Noah, emboldened by Rusty's recovery, joined a reading club at school, his voice stronger as he shared stories about his dog. His anxiety, attacks lessened, and Dr. Ellis, his therapist, noted, "Rusty's giving him a safe space to feel." Laura, inspired by the community's response, took a part-time job teaching literacy classes online, easing the financial strain. She began to see herself not as a struggling widow, but as a fighter like Rusty, rebuilding a life from fragments of loss. At home, Rusty took his place as Noah's shadow, sleeping by his bed, alerting Laura to subtle signs of distress, a fidgeting hand, a furrowed brow, before Noah's anxiety could spiral. "He's like a guardian," Mrs. Clara said, watching Rusty follow Noah to the backyard, his steps surer each day. The Harrisons' shadow lingered, but even they seemed chastened by the town's support. A note arrived from them, offering a donation to Rusty's care in recognition of your dedication. Laura accepted it, channeling the funds into a small savings account for Rusty's future needs, but her trust in their motives remained. Thin, Willow Creek, however, had proven its heart. Neighbors organized a Rusty Rally potluck, raising an extra $500 for his meds, and the library displayed Noah's drawings of Rusty, a quiet celebration of their triumph. As Laura watched Noah toss a ball for Rusty in their yard, the dog's movements fluid and joyful, she felt Tom's presence, a whisper of approval for the family they'd become. But with Rusty's recovery came new questions. How would they sustain this miracle, and what challenges lay ahead? Laura stood in the warm May sunlight, the Willow Creek Community Park buzzing with laughter and the scent of grilled hot dogs. The annual pet fair, a colorful chaos of wagging tails and excited children, had taken on a special glow this year. A small stage draped in blue and white streamers bore a banner, Hero Dog Award, Rusty's Journey. Noah, now 6, stood beside Laura, his hand gripping Rusty's leash, his blue eyes bright with pride. Rusty, his black and white fur gleaming, sat alert at Noah's side, his limp barely noticeable, his heart condition managed with medication and care. The crowd, neighbors, library patrons, even Dr. Patel and Mrs. Clara, cheered as the mayor stepped to the microphone, holding a small plaque engraved with Rusty's name. "Today we honor Rusty," the mayor began, her voice carrying over. "The park, a dog who reminded us that love can heal what looks broken." She recounted his story, the shelter's ticking clock, Noah's quiet courage, Laura's determination, and Willow Creek's rally to save him. Noah beamed as the mayor handed him the plaque, his voice clear as he said, "Rusty's my best friend." The crowd erupted in applause, and Rusty, as if understanding, gave a soft bark, his tail wagging furiously. Laura's eyes misted, her heart full as she looked at her son, no longer the silent boy of a year ago, but a child finding his place in the world, with Rusty as his anchor. The fair was a celebration of their triumph, but also a bridge to reconciliation. The Harrisons, their influence humbled by the town's unity, approached Laura near the pet adoption booth. Mrs. Harrison, her usual polish softened, offered a check for $1,000. "For the shelter, in Rusty's name," she said, her voice lacking. "Here's former edge. We misjudged you, Laura. You've done right by that dog." Mr. Harrison nodded, adding, "We're starting a fund for special needs animals inspired by your story." Laura accepted the check, her smile genuine but cautious, sensing their sincerity but knowing their motives had once threatened her. Family. The donation would help other dogs like Rusty, a legacy that felt like a quiet victory, uniting even those who doubted her. Back home, the rhythm of their lives had settled into a new normal. Noah, now a regular at his school's reading club, called Rusty "my brother," his anxiety attacks rare and mild, thanks to the dog's uncanny ability to sense distress. Rusty, stronger each day, followed Noah everywhere, his eyes bright. With purpose, as if repaying the boy's faith with unwavering loyalty. Laura, bolstered by her literacy classes and the community's trust, felt Tom's presence in their small victories. Rusty chasing a ball in the backyard, Noah laughing, freely, their home alive with warmth. Her part-time job had eased the financial strain, and the crowdfunding surplus covered Rusty's ongoing care, a buffer against future uncertainties. The backyard, once a patch of scruffy grass, had become their sanctuary. Laura sat on the porch steps one evening, a glass of iced tea in hand, watching Noah and Rusty play. Noah tossed a tennis ball, his laughter ringing as Rusty bounded after it, his movements fluid, a far cry from the frail dog in the shelter kennel. "Good boy," Noah called, clapping as Rusty returned, dropping the ball at his feet. Laura smiled, her thoughts drifting to Tom, who dreamed of a dog like this for their family. "You were right," she whispered to his memory, her voice thick with gratitude. Second chances make us whole. Their journey, through loss, doubt, and crisis, had forged a family not despite their struggles, but because of them, each scar a testament to their resilience. The legacy of Rusty's story rippled beyond their home. The shelter, bolstered by the Harrisons' fund and community donations, expanded its medical program, saving more special needs dogs. Noah's drawings of Rusty, displayed at the library, inspired a children's book project, with proceeds supporting animal rescues. Laura, once hesitant to share her story, spoke at a shelter fundraiser, her voice steady as she urged others to choose compassion over convenience. Her words, echoed in the Gazette, reached readers far beyond Willow Creek, a quiet call to see the overlooked, not just dogs but people, families, dreams, as worthy of saving. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Laura called Noah and Rusty inside. Noah hugged Rusty, whispering, "You're home forever," and the dog's tail thumped in agreement. Laura locked the door, her heart light with the truth she'd learned through their ordeal. Love, given freely to the broken, returns tenfold, healing both the giver and the receiver. Rusty's story was their story, a testament to the courage it takes to fight for hope. But as they settled into their new life, a lingering question remained. What new chapters would their bond write? And how would Willow Creek continue to shape their legacy?